Hello and welcome back. On a good note, it's not snowing yet. On a bad note, it is snowing cats and dogs. I don't think cats and dogs is the right thing to call it, but it's snowing really hard just a little bit to the west and north of me. So I know it's coming, no matter how sad that makes me. I think they've gotten about 8 to 10 inches already in Ontonagon and the Houghton Hancock area. I don't think I'm going to get that much. I hope I'm not going to get that much. I really don't want that much snow all in one dump, but I can't control the weather. What I can control is making sure that this video goes up for tomorrow, even if I have no power, which hopefully I will have power. I'm just trying to be like proactive and all that. To be proactive, I even moved the kerosene heater into the vestibule just in case. I I like having heat. Having heat is one of my favorite things, so as much as I don't like a kerosene heater, it's there if you need it. Anyway, hopefully this is all just pointless precautions that I'm taking, but tomorrow's going to be a busy day no matter what. I have a turkey to cook as long as I have power. I did make a cherry pie because I discovered that I didn't have pumpkin puree. Digging through the pantry, I did find stuffing and I did find cranberry sauce. So, other than the pumpkin pie, Thanksgiving is saved. Yay! Because I sure as heck didn't want to go anywhere today. Even though it's not snowing yet, some of those days, you just don't want to do actually anything that involves going out. And most of those days are like that for me. Anyway, we're going to read another couple of chapters of not 20,000 Leagues. That was a better book. Around the World in 80 Days. Which, I mean, as far as travel guides go, it's a great travel guide. As long as you completely ignore the rather racist descriptions of anyone who's not from continental Europe, it's a fantastic travel guide. Anyway, we're gonna read another couple of chapters, and then, provided I have power, as always, I'm going to be live streaming on Friday night. You are more than welcome to join. I think we're going to be building in The Sims again because I have been building a strange version of my childhood home. A strange version because we're doing everything by random chance. So this is if my childhood home were redecorated by my chat and a spinning wheel. It's kind of fun. Anyway, we're going to jump in. We're going to read a couple of chapters of Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, beginning with chapter 27, which is titled In Which Passepartout Undergoes, at a Speed of 20 Miles an Hour, a Course of Mormon History. During the night of the 5th of December, the train ran southeasterly for about 50 miles, then rose an equal distance in a northeasterly direction towards the Great Salt Lake. Passepartout, about 9 o'clock, went out upon the platform to take the air. The weather was cold, the heavens were gray, but it was not snowing. The sun's disk, enlarged by the mist, seems an enormous ring of gold, and Passepartout was amusing himself by calculating its value in pounds sterling when he was diverted from this interesting study by a strange-looking person who made his appearance on the platform. Side note here, I don't know about on the West Coast, so if you live on the West Coast, please enlighten me. But I know where I live, in the 5th of December at 9 o'clock, unless it's 9 o'clock in the morning, which it might be. I took it to be 9 o'clock at night. If it were 9 o'clock at night, there would be no sun. I guess if it was 9 in the morning, there could be sun. That could be a me thing. Back to it. This person, who had taken the train at Elko, was tall and dark, with black mustaches, black stockings, a black silk hat, a black waistcoat, black trousers, a white cravat, and dogskin gloves. He might have been taken for a clergyman. He went from one end of the train to the other and affixed to the door of each car a notice written in manuscript. Passepartout approached and read one of these notices, which stated that Elder William Hitch, Mormon missionary, taking advantage of his presence on the train, number 48, would deliver a lecture on Mormonism in car 117 from 11 to 12 o'clock, and that he invited all who were desirous of being instructed concerning the mysteries of the religion of the Latter-day Saints to come and attend. I will go, thought Passepartout. He knew nothing of Mormonism, excepting the custom of polygamy, which was its foundation. The news spread quickly through the train, which contained about 100 passengers, 30 of whom, at most, attracted by the notice, ensconced themselves in car number 117. Passepartout took one of the front seats. Neither Mr. Fogg or Mr. Fix cared to attend. At the appointed hour, Elder William Hitch rose and, in an irritated voice, as if he had already been contradicted, said, "I tell you, John Smith is a martyr, that his brother Hiram is a martyr, and that the persecutions of the United States government against the prophets will also make a martyr of Brigham Young. Who dares say to the contrary?" No one ventured to gainsay the missionary, whose excited tone contrasted curiously with his naturally calm visage. No doubt his anger rose from the hardships to which the Mormons were subjected. The government had just succeeded with some difficulty in reducing these independent fanatics to its rule. It had made itself master of Utah and subjected the territory to the laws of the Union after imprisoning Brigham Young on a charge of rebellion and polygamy. The disciples of the prophet had since redoubled their efforts and resisted, by words at least, the authority of Congress. Elder Hitch, as is seen, was trying to make proselytes on the very railroad trains. Then, emphasizing his words with his loud voice and his frequent gestures, he related the history of the Mormons from biblical times. How that in Israel, a Mormon prophet from the tribe of Joseph published the annals of a new religion and bequeathed from them to his son Mormon. How centuries later, a translation of this book, which was written in Egyptian, was made by Joseph Smith, Jr., a Vermont farmer who revealed himself as a mystical prophet in 1825. And how, in short, the celestial messenger appeared to him in an illuminated forest and gave him the annals of the Lord. Several of the audience, not being much interested in the missionary's narrative, here left the car. But Elder Hitch, continuing his lecture, related how Smith Jr., with his father, 2 brothers, and a few disciples, founded the Church of the Latter-day Saints, which adopted not only in America, but in England, Norway, Sweden, and in Germany, counts as many artisans as well as men engaged in liberal professions amongst its members. How a colony was established in Ohio, a temple erected there at the cost of $200,000, and a town built at Kirkland. How Smith became an enterprising banker and received from a simple mummy showman a papyrus scroll written by Abraham and a few famous Egyptians. The elder's story became somewhat tiresome, and his audience grew gradually less until it was reduced to just 20 passengers. But this did not disconcert the enthusiast, who proceeded with the story of Joseph Smith's bankruptcy in 1837, and how his ruined creditors gave him a coat of tar and feathers. His reappearance a few years afterwards, more honorable and honored than ever, in Independence, Missouri. the chief of a flourishing colony of 300 people, and his pursuit there by the outraged Gentiles, and then his retirement to the far west. There were only 10 people left now. Among them, the honest Passepartout, who was listening with all of his ears. Thus he learned that after long persecution, Smith reappeared in Illinois and in 1839 founded a community at Nauvoo along the Mississippi River, numbering 25,000 souls, of which he became the mayor, the chief justice, and the general-in-chief. That he announced himself in 1843 as a candidate for presidency of the United States, and that finally, being drawn into the ambuscade at Carthage, he had been thrown into prison and assassinated there by a band of men who were all disguised in masks. Passepartout was now the only one left in the car, and the elder, looking him full in the face, reminded him that 2 years after the assassination of Joseph Smith, the inspired prophet, Brigham Young, his successor, had left Nauvoo for the banks of the Great Salt Lake, where in the midst of that fertile region, directly on the route of immigrants who crossed Utah on their way to California, the new colony, thanks to the polygamy practiced by the Mormons, had flourished beyond all expectations. "And this," said Elder William Hitch, "this is why the jealousy of Congress has been aroused against us. Why have soldiers of the Union invaded the soil of Utah? Why has Brigham Young, our chief, been imprisoned in contempt of all justice? Shall we yield to force? Never. Driven from Vermont, driven from Illinois, driven from Ohio, driven from Missouri, driven from Utah, we will yet find some independent territory on which to plant our texts. And you, my brother," said the elder, fixing an angry eye upon his single audience member, "will you not plant yours there too, under the shadow of our flag?" "No," said Passepartout courageously, in turn leaving the car and leaving the elder to preach to no one. During the lecture, the train had been making good progress, and around 12:30 it had reached the northwest border of the Great Salt Lake. There, passengers could observe the vast extent of this interior sea, which is also called the Dead Sea, and into which flows an American Jordan. It's a picturesque expanse, framed in lofty crags in large strata, encrusted with white salt. It's a superb sheet of water, which was formerly of a larger extent than it is now, the shores having encroached with the lapse of time, and thus at once reduced its breadth and increased its depth. The Salt Lake, 70 miles long and 35 miles wide, is situated 3 miles 800 feet above the sea. Quite different from Lake Asphaltite, whose depression is 1,200 feet below the sea. It contains considerable salt, and 1/4 of the weight of its water is solid matter, its specific weight being 1170, and after being distilled 1,000. Fish are, of course, unable to live in it, and those which descend through the Jordan, the Weber, and the other streams all soon perish. The country around the lake is well cultivated, for the Mormons are mostly farmers, while ranches and pens for domesticated animals, fields of wheat, corn, and other cereals, luxurious prairies, hedges of wild rose, clumps of acacia and milkwort would have been seen 6 months later. Now, however, the ground was covered with a thin powdering of snow. The train reached Ogden at 2:00, where it rested for 6 hours. Mr. Fogg and his party had time to pay a visit to Salt Lake City, connected with Ogden by a branch road, and they spent 2 hours in this strikingly American town, built on the pattern of other cities of the Union, kind of like a checkerboard, with the somber sadness of right angles. Well, that's what Victor Hugo thinks anyway. The founder of the City of the Saints could not escape from the taste for symmetry which distinguishes the Anglo-Saxons. In this strange country, where the people are certainly not up to the level of their institutions, everything is done squarely. Cities, houses, and their follies. The travelers then were promenading at 3 o'clock around the streets of the town built between the banks of the Jordan and the spurs of the Wasatch River. They saw few or no churches, but they did see the prophet's mansion, the courthouse, and the arsenal. Blue brick houses with verandas and porches surrounded by gardens bordered with acacias, palms, and locusts. A clay and pebble wall built in 1853 surrounded the town, and in the principal street were the market and several hotels adorned with pavilions. The place didn't seem very thickly populated. The streets were almost deserted, except in the vicinity of the temple, which they only reached after having traversed several quarters surrounded by palisades. There were many women, which was easily accounted for by the peculiar institution of the Mormons, but it must not be supposed that all Mormons are polygamists. They are free to marry or not as they please, but it is worth noting that it is mainly the female citizens of Utah who are anxious to marry, as, according to the Mormon religion, maiden ladies are not admitted to the possession of its highest joys. These poor creatures seem to be neither well off or happy. Some of the more well-to-do, no doubt, wore short, open black silk dresses under a hood or Mana shawl, but others were dressed in the Native American fashion. Passepartout could not behold without a certain fright these women, charged in groups with conferring happiness upon one single Mormon man. His common sense pitied above all their husband. It seemed to him a terrible thing to have to guide so many wives at once across the trials of life, and to conduct them, as it were, in a body to the Mormon paradise, with the prospect of seeing them in the company of the glorious Smith, who doubtless was the chief ornament of that delightful place for all of eternity. He felt kind of repelled from such a vocation, and he imagined, perhaps he was mistaken, that the fair ones of Salt Lake City cast rather alarming glances upon his person. Happily, his stay there was but brief. At 4, the party found themselves again at the station, took their places on the train, and the whistle sounded for the start. Just at that moment, however, that the locomotive wheels began to move, cries of "Stop!" were heard. Trains, much like time and tide, stop for no one. The gentleman who uttered the cries was evidently a belated Mormon. He was breathless with running. Happily for him, the station had neither gates or barriers. He rushed along the track and jumped on the rear platform of the train and fell exhausted into his seat. Passepartout, who had anxiously been watching this amateur gymnast, approached him with a lively interest and learned that he had taken flight after an unpleasant domestic scene. When this man had recovered his breath, Passepartout ventured to ask him politely how many wives he had, because from the manner in which he had decamped, it might be thought that he at least had 20. "One, sir," said the Mormon, raising his arms towards heaven. "One, and that was enough." And that is where the chapter ends. That was a interesting chapter. I don't know if that is actually the history of the Mormon religion in Utah and all the other places that it was, because I don't know that much about Mormonism. Interesting nonetheless. I also don't know I would have to look it up if the Great Salt Lake is actually too salty for fish. I don't know. That's interesting. I know the actual Dead Sea, I think, doesn't have fish, and there's another lake up in Canada that's salty that also doesn't have fish, but there are some birds that nest there. I don't know. What I do know is I'm going to go grab a drink, and we will do another chapter when I return. All right, got a drink, looked outside. It is not snowing yet, but it is sort of drizzling really, really cold rain. So I think the weather is about to begin. Boo hiss. It was supposed to start with rain, which I hope doesn't mean with the cold front coming through that everything freezes on the trees, because that's never good either. Anyway, let's see what this Mormon man is running from. Hopefully not his wife. Hopefully, I mean, you would think she would be the one running, not the man. I guess we'll find out, though, as we jump into chapter 28 of Around the World in 80 Days, in which Passepartout does not succeed in making anybody listen to reason. The train, on leaving Great Salt Lake at Ogden, passed north for an hour as far as Weber River, having completed nearly 900 miles from San Francisco. From this point, it took an easterly direction towards the jagged Wasatch Mountains. It was in the section included between this range and the Rocky Mountains that American engineers found the most formidable difficulties in laying the tracks, and that the government granted a subsidy of $48,000 per mile instead of $16,000 allowed for the work done on the plains. But the engineers, instead of violating nature, avoided its difficulties by winding around instead of penetrating the rocks. One tunnel only, 14,000 feet in length, was pierced in order to arrive at the Great Basin. The track, up to this time, had reached its highest elevation at Great Salt Lake. From this point, it described a long curve descending towards Bitter Creek Valley to rise again to the dividing ridge of the waters between the Atlantic and the Pacific. There were many creeks in this mountainous region, and it was necessary to cross Muddy Creek, Green Creek, and others upon culverts. Passepartout was growing more and more impatient as they went on, and Wellfix longed to get out of this difficult region, and was more anxious than Phileas Fogg himself to be beyond the danger of delays and accidents, and set foot on English soil. At 10 o'clock at night, the train stopped at Fort Bridger Station, and 20 minutes later entered Wyoming territory, following the valley of Bitter Creek throughout. The next day, December 7th, they stopped for a quarter of an hour at Green River Station. Snow had fallen heavily during the night, but being mixed with rain, it had halfway melted, so did not interrupt their progress. This bad weather, though, annoyed Passepartout, for the accumulation of snow by blocking the wheels of the cars would certainly have been fatal to Mr. Fogg's tour. "What an idea," he said to himself. "Why did my master make this journey in winter? Couldn't he have waited for the good season?" Well, the worthy Frenchman was absorbed in the state of the sky and the depression of the temperature. Aouda was experiencing fears from a totally different cause. Several passengers had gotten off at Green River and were walking up and down the platforms, and among these, Aouda recognized Colonel Stamp Proctor, the same man who had so grossly insulted Phileas Fogg at the San Francisco meeting. Not wishing to be recognized, the young woman instantly drew back from the window, feeling much alarm at her discovery. She was attached to the man who, however coldly, gave her daily evidence of absolute devotion. She did not comprehend, perhaps, the depth of the sentiment with which her protector inspired her. She called it gratitude, but which, though she was not unconscious of it, was really much more. Her heart sank in her when she recognized the man who Mr. Fogg desired at some point to call to account for his conduct. Chance alone, it was clear, had brought Colonel Proctor on this train, but there he was, and it was necessary, utterly necessary, that Phileas Fogg should not know he was there. Aouda seized a moment when Mr. Fogg was asleep to tell Fix and Passepartout what she had seen. "Proctor, on this train?" said Fix. "Well, reassure yourself, madam. Before he settles with Mr. Fogg, he's got a great deal to settle with me. It seems to me I was the more insulted of the two of us." "And besides," said Passepartout, "I will take charge of him, colonel as he is." "Mr. Fix," said Aouda, "Mr. Fogg will allow no one to avenge him. He said that he would come back to America to find this man. Should he perceive Colonel Proctor, we could not prevent a collision which might have terrible results. He must not see him." "You're right, madam," said Fix. "A meeting between them might ruin everything. Whether he were victorious or beaten, Mr. Fogg would be delayed, and, said Passepartout, "that would play the game of the gentlemen of the Reform Club. In 4 days we will be in New York. Well, if monsieur does not leave this car during the 4 days, we may hope that chance will not bring him face to face with this confounded American. We must, if possible, prevent him from going out of the car at all." The conversation dropped because Mr. Fogg had just woken up and was looking out of the window. Later, Passepartout, without being heard by his master or Aouda, whispered to Detective Fix, "Would you really fight for him?" "I'd do it anything," said Fix, in a tone which betrayed his determination to get him back alive to Europe. Passepartout felt something like a shudder shoot through him, but his confidence in his master remained unbroken. Was there any means of detaining Mr. Fogg in the car, so to avoid a meeting between him and the colonel? It ought not be a difficult task, since Phileas Fogg was naturally sedentary and not very curious. The detective, at least, seemed to have found a way, for after a few moments he said to Mr. Fogg, "These are long, slow hours that we're passing on the train, isn't it?" "Yes," said Mr. Fogg, "but they passed." "You used to be in the habit of playing whist," said Detective Fix. "On the boats." "Yes, but it would be very difficult to do so here. I have neither cards nor partners," said Fogg. "Oh, we can easily buy some cards, for they're sold on every American train, and as for partners, if Madame plays—" "Oh, certainly, sir," said Aouda. "I understand whist. It's part of English education." "Well, I myself have some pretensions to playing a good game, too. That's 3 and a dummy." "As you please, sir," said Phileas Fogg, heartily happy to resume his favorite pastime, even on the train. Passepartout was dispatched in search of the steward, and soon returned with 2 packs of cards, some pins, counters, and a shelf covered with cloth. And so the game commenced. Aouda understood whist sufficiently well, and even received some compliments on her play from Mr. Fogg. As for the detective, he was simply an adept, and worthy of being matched against his present opponent. "Now," thought Passepartout, "we've got him. He will not budge." At 11 a.m., the train had reached the dividing ridge of the waters at Bridger Pass, 7,524 feet above the level of the sea, one of the highest points attained by the railroad in crossing the Rocky Mountains. After going about 200 miles, the travelers at last found themselves on one of those vast plains which extend to the Atlantic and which nature has made so precipitous for laying the iron road. On the declivity of the Atlantic basin, the first streams, branches of the North Platte River, had already appeared. The whole northern and eastern horizon was bounded by the immense semicircular curtain which is formed by the southern portion of the Rockies, the highest of them being Laramie Peak. Between this and the railway extended vast plains, plentifully irrigated. On the right rose the lower spurs of the mountainous mass, which extends southward to the source of the Arkansas River, which is one of the great tributaries of the Missouri. At 12:30, the travelers caught sight for an instant of Fort Halleck, which commands that section, and in a few more hours the Rocky Mountains were crossed. There was reason to hope, then, that no accident would mark the journey through this difficult country. The snow had ceased falling, and the air became crisp and cold. Large birds, frightened by the train, rose and flew off in the distance. No wild beast appeared on the plain at all. It was a desert in its vast nakedness. After a comfortable breakfast served in the car, Mr. Fogg and his partners resumed playing whist when a violent whistle was heard and the train stopped. Passepartout put his head out of the door, but saw nothing to cause the delay. There was no station in view. Aouda and Detective Fix feared that Mr. Fogg might take it into his head to get off, but that gentleman contented himself with saying, "Go see what's the matter," to Passepartout. So Passepartout rushed out of the car. 30 or 40 passengers had already descended, amongst them Colonel Stamp Proctor. The train had stopped in front of a red signal which blocked the way. The engineer and the conductor were talking excitedly with a signalman who the station master at Medicine Bow, their next stopping place, had sent on in front. The passengers drew around and took part in the discussion in which Colonel Proctor, with his insolent manner, was conspicuous throughout. Passepartout, joining the group, heard the signalman say, "No, you can't pass. The bridge at Medicine Bow is shaky and won't take the train." This was a suspension bridge thrown over some rapids about a mile from the place where they now were. According to the signalman, it was in a ruinous condition. Several of the iron wires were broken, and it was impossible to risk the passage. He did not in any way exaggerate the condition of the bridge either. It may be taken for granted that, rash as Americans usually are, when they're prudent with good reason. Passepartout, not daring to apprise his master of what he heard, listened with his teeth clenched, immovable as a statue. Cried Colonel Proctor. "But aren't we going to stay here? I can't imagine we're going to take root in the snow." "Colonel," said the conductor, "we have telegraphed to Omaha for a train, but it is not likely it will reach Medicine Bow in less than 6 hours." "6 hours!" cried Passepartout. "Yes," said the conductor. "Besides, it will take us as long as that to reach Medicine Bow on foot." "But it's only a mile away," said one of the passengers. "Yeah, but it's on the other side of a river," said the conductor. "And what, we can't cross it in a boat?" said the colonel. "No, it's impossible. The creek is swelled by the rains, it's rapids, and we would have to make a circuit of 10 miles to the north to find a ford." The colonel launched into a volley of oaths, denouncing the railway company and the conductor, and Passepartout, who was furious, was not disinclined to make a common cause with this man. Here was an obstacle indeed, which all of his master's money was not going to help. There was a general disappointment amongst the passengers who, without reckoning the delay, saw themselves compelled to trudge 15 miles over a snow-covered plain. They grumbled and protested, and would certainly have attracted Phileas Fogg's attention if he had not been completely absorbed in his game of whist. Passepartout found that he could not avoid telling his master what had happened, and with hanging head he was turning towards the car when the engineer, a true Yankee named Forster, called out, "Hey, you, sir, perhaps there's a way after all to get out." "On the bridge?" "On the bridge." "With our train?" "Yeah." Passepartout stopped and eagerly listened to the engineer. "But the bridge is unsafe," said the conductor. "No matter," said Forster. "I think that by putting on our very highest speed, we might have a chance of getting over." "Ah, le diable," said Passepartout. But a number of the passengers were at once attracted to the engineer's proposal, and Colonel Proctor was especially delighted, and he found the plan very feasible. He told stories about engineers jumping their trains over rivers without bridges by putting them on full steam, and many of the ones present avowed themselves of the engineer's mind. "We have 50 chances out of 100 of getting over," said one person. 80, 90. Passepartout was astounded, and, though ready to attempt anything to get over Medicine Creek, thought that the experiment proposed was just a little too American. Besides, he thought, there is still a more simple way, and it does not even occur to any of these people. "Sir," he said aloud to one of the passengers, "the engineer's plan seems to me a bit dangerous, but—" "80 chances," said the passenger. "I know, but," said Passepartout, it is a très simple idea." "Ideas are no use," declared the American, shrugging his shoulders. "The engineer assumes we can pass." "Doubtless," said Passepartout, "doubtless we can pass, but perhaps it would be more prudent to—" "What? Prudent?" said Colonel Proctor, who this word seemed to anger. "At full speed, don't you see? We'll go full speed." "Yes, I know, I see," said Passepartout, "but would be, if not more prudent, since that word displeases you, more natural—" "What? What? What's the matter with this guy?" cried several of the people. The poor fellow did not know who to address. "Are you afraid?" said Colonel Proctor. "Oui, sir. Very, very well. I am not afraid. I will show these people that a Frenchman can be as much of an American as they can." At that moment, the conductor called, "All aboard?" "Yes, all aboard," said Passepartout, and immediately. "But they cannot prevent me from thinking that it would be no more natural for us to cross the bridge on foot and let the train follow." But no one listened to this sage reflection, nor would anyone have acknowledged that it might work. The passengers resumed their places in the cars, and Passepartout took his seat without telling anyone what had happened. And the whist players, well, they were quite absorbed in their game. The locomotive whistled vigorously. The engineer, reversing the steam, backed the train up for almost a mile, moving back like a jumper in order to make a long leap. Then, with another whistle, he began moving forward, the train increasing its speed, and soon it became frightfully fast. A prolonged screech issued from the locomotive. The piston worked up and down, 20 strokes to the second. They perceived that the whole train, rushing on to the gate, or at a rate of some 100 miles an hour, was barely on the tracks at all. And they passed over it. It was like a flash. No one saw the bridge. The train leaped, so to speak, from one bank to the other, and the engineer could not stop it until they had gone 5 miles past the station. But scarcely had the train passed the river when the bridge, now completely ruined, fell with a crash into the Medicine Bow Creek. And that is where we're going to leave it. That was interesting. I don't think you can jump a train. I could be wrong. I feel like I keep saying that a lot. There's a lot of things I don't know, but I don't think I've ever seen or heard of anyone jumping a train. So, well, except for a YouTuber that I watch called Call Me Kevin, but those are video game trains, and he usually wrecks them. So, not really something I think is feasible. We're firmly in the realm of fiction. Anyway, I hope you guys are having a fantastic Turkey Day. I hope that you had a wonderful time with all of the foods that you love. If you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope you also had a wonderful day. I'm going to hopefully have a wonderful day, and I will see you Monday for yet more Around the World in 80 Days. Bye.